This is Amina, and I am back to continue reading the chapter that we left off of. That chapter was called The Weekly Test, and we read half of that chapter, and we're going to read part two of that chapter today. So, in Weekly Test, we saw Miss Trunchbull visit Matilda's class, and the last thing that we saw was that she punished a boy called Rupert because he did not know what 2 times 7 was. So, let's see what she does next. The Trunchbull returned to the front of the class. The children sat there hypnotized. None of them had seen anything quite like this before. It was splendid entertainment. It was better than a pantomime, but with one big difference. In this room there was an enormous human bomb in front of them which was liable to explode and blow someone to bits any moment. The children's eyes were riveted on the headmistress. "I don't like small people," she said. "Small people should never be seen by anybody. They should be kept out of sight in boxes like hairpins and buttons. I cannot for the life of me see why children have to take so long to grow up. I think they do it on purpose." Another extremely brave little boy in the front row spoke up and said, "But surely you were a small person once, Miss Trunchbull, weren't you?" "I was never a small person," she snapped. "I have been large all my life, and I don't see why others can't be the same way." "But you must have started out as a baby," the boy said. "Me, a baby!" shouted the Trunchbull. "How dare you suggest such a thing? What cheek! What infernal insolence! What's your name, boy?" The boy stood up. "My name is Eric Ink, Miss Trunchbull," he said. "Eric what?" the Trunchbull shouted. "Ink," the boy said. "Don't be so silly, boy. There's no such name." "Look in the phone book," Eric said. "You'll see my father there under Ink." "Very well, then," the Trunchbull said. "You may be Ink, young man, but let me tell you something. You're not indelible. I'll very soon rub you out if you try getting clever with me." "Spell what?" "I don't understand," Eric said. "What do you want me to spell?" "Spell what, you idiot? Spell the word what." "WOT," Eric said, answering too quickly. There was a nasty silence. "I'll give you one more chance," the Trunchbull said, not moving. "Ah, yes, I know. It's got an H in it. WHOT. It's easy." In two large strides the Trunchbull was behind Eric's desk, and there she stood, a pillar of doom, towering over the helpless boy. Eric glanced fearfully back over his shoulder at the monster. "I was right, wasn't I?" he murmured nervously. "You were wrong," she barked. "In fact, you strike me as the sort of poisonous little pockmark that will always be wrong. You sit wrong, you look wrong, you speak wrong. I will give you one more chance to be right. Spell what?" Eric hesitated. Then he said very slowly, "It's not WOT, it's not WHOT. I know, it must be WHOTT." Standing behind Eric, the Trunchbull reached out and took hold of the boy's two ears, one with each hand, pinching them between her forefinger and thumb. "Ow!" he cried. "You're hurting me." "I haven't started yet," she said briskly. And now, taking a firm grip on his two ears, she lifted him bodily out of his seat and held him aloft. Like Rupert before him, Eric squealed. From the back of the classroom Miss Honey cried out, "Miss Trunchbull, don't! His ears might come off." "They will never come off," the Trunchbull shouted. "I have discovered through long experience, Miss Honey, that the ears of small boys are stuck very firmly to their heads." "Let him go, Miss Trunchbull, please," begged Miss Honey. "You could damage him, you really could. You could wrench them right off." "Ears never come off," the Trunchbull shouted. "They stretch more marvelously, like these are doing right now, but I can assure you they never come off." Eric was squealing louder than ever and pedaling the air with his legs. Matilda had never before seen a boy, or anyone else for that matter, held aloft by his ears alone. Like Miss Honey, she felt sure that both ears were going to come off at any moment, with all the weight that was on them. The Trunchbull was shouting, "The word what is spelled WHAT. Now spell it, you little wart." Eric didn't hesitate. He had learned from watching Rupert a few minutes before that the quicker you answered, the quicker you were released. "WHAT," he squealed. Still holding him by the ears, Trunchbull lowered him back into his chair behind his desk. Then she marched back to the front of the class, dusting off her hands once again like she was holding something grimy. "That's the way to make them learn, Miss Honey," she said. "You take it from me, there's no good just telling them. You've got to hammer it into them." "You could do permanent damage," Miss Honey said. "Oh, I have, I'm sure I have," the Trunchbull answered, grinning. "Eric's ear would have stretched quite considerably in the last couple of minutes. They'll be much longer now than they were before. There's nothing wrong with that, Miss Honey. It'll give him an interesting pixie look for the rest of his life." "But Miss Trunchbull—" "Oh, do shut up, Miss Honey. You're as wet as any of them. If you can't cope in here, then you go and find a job in some cotton wool private school for witch brats. When you've been teaching for as long as I have, you will realize it's no good at all being kind to children. Read Nicholas Nickleby, Miss Honey, by Mr. Dickens. Read about Mr. Wackford Squeers, the admirable headmaster of Dotheboys Hall. He knew how to handle the little brutes, didn't he? He knew how to use the birch, didn't he? He kept their backsides so warm he could have fried eggs and bacon on them. But I don't suppose this bunch of morons we've got here will ever read it, because by the look of them they're never going to learn to read anything." "I've read it," Matilda said quietly. The Trunchbull flicked her head round and looked carefully at the small girl with dark hair and deep brown eyes sitting in the second row. "What did you say?" she asked sharply. "I said I've read it, Miss Trunchbull." "Read what?" "Nicholas Nickleby, Miss Trunchbull." "You're lying to me, madam," the Trunchbull shouted, glaring at Matilda. "I doubt there's a single child in the entire school who's read that book, and here you are, an unhatched shrimp sitting in the lowest form there is, trying to tell me a whopping great lie like that. Why do you do it? You must take me for a fool. Do you take me for a fool, child?" "Well," Matilda said, hesitating. She would have liked to said, "Yes, I jolly well do," but that would have been suicide. "Well," she said again, still hesitating, still refusing to say no. The Trunchbull sensed what the child was thinking, and she didn't like it. "Stand up when you speak to me. What's your name?" "My name is Matilda Wormwood, Miss Trunchbull." "Wormwood, is it?" the Trunchbull said. "In that case you must be the daughter of the man who owns Wormwood Motors?" "Yes, Miss Trunchbull." "He's a crook!" the Trunchbull shouted. "A week ago he sold me a second-hand car that he said was almost new. I thought he was a splendid fellow then. But this morning, while I was driving that car through the village, the entire engine fell out on the road. The whole thing was filled with sawdust. The man's a thief and a robber. I'll have his skin for sausages. You see if I don't." "He's clever at his business," Matilda said. "Clever my foot!" the Trunchbull shouted. "Miss Honey tells me that you are meant to be clever too. Well, madam, I don't like clever people. They're all crooked. You are most certainly crooked. Before I fell out with your father he told me some very nasty stories about the way you behaved at home. But you'd better not try anything in the school, young lady. I shall be keeping a very careful eye on you from now on. Sit down and keep quiet." Wow, that brings us to the end of that very scary chapter. I am really excited to see what Matilda does next. I feel like she will probably try to punish Miss Trunchbull like she's tried to punish other people in the past, but that would be a very scary endeavor. So let's see what happens next, and I will meet you guys very soon. Bye bye and take care.